academic societies have their own agendas. The U.S. has many academic medical societies. Many of them overlap, and all are political. For instance, who is in charge of diabetes? Those organizations laying claim include the Endocrine Society, Pediatric Endocrine Society, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, Diabetes Technology Society, and the omnipresent and ubiquitous 2,000-pound gorilla in the room, American Diabetes Association, ADA. Many of these societies say that they issue clinical guidelines for clinicians in order to promulgate and maintain standards of care within the profession. But is it more to promulgate and maintain a chokehold over thought and discourse? The ADA has been particularly egregious in its ignorance of the science involved in the issuance of its guidelines. Full disclosure: I don't belong and have never belonged to the ADA, in part because of their head-in-the-sand approach to diabetes care. I got into the obesity field in 1995 and went to my first ADA meeting in 2002. I was dumbfounded. First, there was not one talk on prevention of type 2 diabetes, only on treatment. Second, here is the society that presumably knows the most about the role of insulin in disease, and they're promoting the message that obese people are at fault for eating too damn much. Then they tell people with diabetes to eat whatever they want, just so long as they count their carbs and take enough insulin to cover it. Given what we know about glucose and insulin excursions causing chronic metabolic disease, why would they advocate for that? Nonetheless, the ADA guidelines advised this through 2018. I saw plenty of kids with type 1 diabetes over the years, and the best way to get their hemoglobin A1C down was to get their carbohydrate consumption down, although not every study has been able to get kids to do this effectively. I never understood the ADA's stance against carbohydrate restriction, and I've spoken out against it on many occasions. The light bulb of just how conflicted the ADA is went off for me on April 28, 2017, when Stephen Dubner, host of the podcast Freakonomics and a personal hero, released his report, "There's a War on Sugar. Is it justified?" 3 people were interviewed: Dr. Margaret Hamburg, an MD and former head of the FDA, Dr. Richard Kahn, a PhD and former chief science officer of the ADA until 2009, no relation to C. Ronald Kahn, and myself. Richard Kahn is a true case study. In 2014, he co-authored an editorial in Diabetes Care exonerating sugar as a cause of obesity and diabetes. In this Freakonomics episode, when Dubner asked Kahn about the cause of obesity, he said, "There's been some evidence that with the increased use of psychotropic drugs, antidepressive drugs, drugs for schizophrenia and other mental disorders, those drugs tend to promote weight gain. And when people stop smoking, that's usually been associated with weight gain. Many people do believe that sugar consumption has been the cause of our obesity epidemic and subsequently diabetes. But I believe the evidence for this is pretty weak." In 2017, San Francisco was debating adding warning labels to cans of soda akin to packs of cigarettes, a campaign in which I was the scientific expert and reviewer of promotional materials. Richard Kahn, in opposition, co-authored an expert report on behalf of the American Beverage Association. In that report, he wrote, "There is no scientific consensus that added sugar, including added sugar in beverages, plays a unique role in the development of obesity and diabetes. Could it be because Kahn, during his tenure at the ADA, signed a 3-year, $1.5 million sponsorship deal with Cadbury Schweppes, the world's largest confectioner?" In the end, bowing to political pressure from Big Food, California put the kibosh on the campaign before implementation. Interestingly, my UCSF colleague Dean Schillinger looked at the same data sets Kahn did, 60 studies in all, see Chapter 23, and when taken in toto, Kahn is correct. There is no clear consensus. But Schillinger added one variable: food company sponsorship. Lo and behold, of the 26 studies sponsored by food companies, all 26 showed no effect. Of the 34 studies that were independently funded, 33 showed a clear relationship between sugar consumption, obesity, and diabetes, meaning the food industry has polluted the data. See Chapter 23. And Kahn toes the same line, polluting it further. He ultimately was replaced by a true National Institutes of Health, NIH-trained MD diabetes researcher William Cefalu, and for the first time, The 2019 ADA guidelines mention that carbohydrate restriction could be a viable option for some diabetics. Yet they still haven't acknowledged sugar as a cause of diabetes. And they're not the only ones. On its website, Diabetes UK says, with type 2 diabetes, we know sugar doesn't directly cause it, but you are more likely to get type 2 diabetes if you are overweight. Maybe this assertion has something to do with the fact that Diabetes UK received a £500,000 contribution from Britvic, the company that is licensed to sell PepsiCo in the UK. This at the exact same time that the International Diabetes Federation, IDF, which represents 198 countries, just not the US, UK, and Australia, told the Group of 20, G20, and International Forum of Central Banks that taxing sugar could save lives and money. What does the ADA and Diabetes UK say sugar doesn't cause diabetes, while the IDF says taxing sugar could prevent type 2 diabetes? Because many of the IDF's member countries are poor. They can't afford the refrigerators to store the insulin, never mind the insulin itself. As a result, they have to prevent disease, and that means changing the food. But to implement the same changes, the US, UK, and Australian diabetes societies would have to admit that they were wrong, and have continued to be wrong for decades now. When given the choice, it's easier to throw meds at the problem and throw shade at the critics. Academic societies often blur the facts. What would happen to the ADA if people knew they could prevent diabetes without medicine? What would happen to all the big pharma money coming in to support the ADA budget? In the bad old days, many academic organizations sold their name to corporations. For instance, the American Medical Association to Sunbeam, and the ADA to Snackwells. But that practice is now frowned upon. The ADA is number 100 in profitable charities, with $182 million in annual revenues, of which 40% come from pharmaceutical corporate donations. In the decade 2002 to 2013, while the ADA declared diabetes a treatable disease with meds, thereby increasing the market, the cost of insulin tripled. After all, why would a private, non-profit society dedicated to eradicating a disease want the disease eradicated? Most medical professional societies eschew nutritional information and policy because appropriate nutrition can both treat and prevent disease, while most organizations are in the business of only treating disease with medications. For example, we know that sugar consumption drives the development of type 2 diabetes, but the US, UK, and Australian diabetes associations refuse to acknowledge that we could prevent and treat type 2 diabetes through sugar restriction. They much prefer issuing prescriptions. Why? The answer is simple. Because if we prevented diabetes, they'd go out of business. And after all, medical societies are run by people who've got their own skins or wallets in the game. There's more money at stake than you might think. A recent analysis of the 10 U.S. societies with the costliest disease expenditures shows that 72% of board members have extensive ties with industry, receiving a median honorarium of $32,000, with an upper range of over $500,000 for the oncologists. No wonder drugs rule medicine. See Chapter 6.